One of my favorite ways, just right off the top here, to grow a podcast audience is to be a guest on other people's podcasts. I think it can be a really fantastic way to grow your show. And frankly, it can be a really good way to connect with other podcasters as a podcaster. So today I want to talk about podcast pitching services because often they seem like a really easy, leveraged way to be getting more podcast guest opportunities, but often they end up not being the dream we hoped they would be. So today we're going to talk about that. Let's get into it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. It was really kind of surprising to me initially when I started getting these questions about podcast pitching services, most frequently from our production clients, honestly. Uh, and it often stemmed from the fact that they had already in the past partnered with somebody, either who was like a full service, like podcast pitching agency and had lots of people, or maybe a VA or marketing assistant or sometimes PR sort of backed people will offer pitching as part of their services, right? As part of either an ongoing service that they're doing or as a standalone service. And the people who would ask me about this the people who ask me about this most often are generally either coming off of having had a not great experience themselves or have heard the horror stories and or have experienced a lot of the really bad pitches that can sometimes come from these services and from the folks that offer them. Now, I want to say up front, there are legit great folks who do this. The biggest benefit, in my opinion, is working with people who have relationships already with hosts, because that tends to work best. But we're going to talk about all of those things. We're going to talk about process. We're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about how they qualify shows. Also, we're going to talk about what we're responsible for. Because sometimes when our results don't turn out the way we want them to, in any sort of consultant or service provider relationship, we skip the step that is us taking responsibility for where we did or did not show up. And so we're going to wrap up talking about sort of our side of the deal. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we do have one spot available right now to join us for Podcast Launch Accelerator. This is a 60-day container where we build the strategy and the plan for you to launch your podcast. If you would like to also have your first season produced, which I'm going to be honest with you, this is what most people take advantage of, and in my opinion, it is the best way to actually get your show done. The container does expand to 3 months. We need a little more time once we add in production, but it allows us to give you all the strategy and then the first season fully produced, uploaded to your podcast host. And by the way, podcast host and all that stuff set up. And really take care of that. So all you have to do is sit down with me and do the strategy, do the recording, and then actually share the show with your audience, because it will be out in the world whether you share it or not. But if you would like to do that in Q2 or in Q3, we'll have some spots as well. You're going to want to get on that because we only have one spot left for Q2. So head on over to uncommonlymore.com/accelerator and learn more about the Podcast Launch Accelerator. I love this container. It has been a really fun way to launch shows over the last year since we've done it. I will tell you right now, almost every show we have launched has gone into ongoing production, meaning they ended up with a show they stuck with because it worked really well for them. But we have had some folks who used that first season of the show for a little while before they moved into that production, because we're building you an asset whether you have an ongoing show or not. So if you're somebody who's been thinking about a podcast, but what seems scary to you is the lack of an end date on this project, because I know that can feel really overwhelming, especially when your capacity is feeling crunched, this container is really good because we're going to build you an asset that you can use whether you keep going or not. And I will say some versions of what ongoing production has looked like for our clients has been they essentially do the launch accelerator modified a little for their seasons. And so we sort of just redo not redo the project, but like they sort of move into that container again because we're just doing season 2 of their show and then season 3 of their show. Cuz again, that open loop of an evergreen podcast is sometimes overwhelming, especially when your capacity feels crunched or you're in a season of life where your availability and scheduling is less consistent or more disrupted. Either way can be a good option. I will stop ranting about the accelerator now. I just really love this program, and we just wrapped with somebody, and so I'm feeling extra ooey gooey about it. So if you want to do that in Q2 with me though, let's get on the horn, as we said in ye olden days, and talk about it. Now, I want to get back into our podcast pitching conversation because this first place for me is such an important conversation to have. I want to talk about it first because I know not everybody listens to the whole episode, and if you listen to nothing else, I do want you to listen to this because every single person I've talked to who has asked me about a podcast pitching service because they've had a negative experience, when I've asked them about what the podcast services process was, they couldn't answer the question. Even having worked with them, much less had they asked that before they started working with them. And this is something that is so important because it will highlight for you that some of these folks don't have a process. And I'll tell you, having, worked with clients who worked with people who were great, having, I have done trainings inside of programs for some of the people who offer these services. And so I have some of these people in my world. I'm going to tell you, the ones who are legit, the ones who are getting good, consistent, quality placements for their clients, they have a process. They know exactly where things are happening, why they're happening. They have a structure. They know what's going on. There is a research phase. There is an alignment phase. There is customized outreach. They know what's going on and can tell you what that process is. And maybe more importantly, can show you what it looks like. And by that, I mean, they show their clients the base template that gets customized and where those customizations come in. And oftentimes, those clients, and we're going to get more into this later, but those clients are involved not just in the hiring and then going in on the interview, but in that process, in that research phase, in that alignment check, in that customized outreach. One of my favorite stories ever was I talked to somebody and they were asking me about podcast pitching services and they had worked with somebody that hadn't worked out, and the thing that ended it, the straw that broke the camel's back, was they pitched a podcast of somebody the client knew. And they weren't like best friends, but they knew each other. They went to a lot of the same events, they hung out in a lot of the same rooms, they had a lot of people in common, and they got the same cold template that every other podcast that this agency was pitching for this client got. And that person sent an email to the client and said, "This can't possibly be you. We know each other." And it was like, wow, that's embarrassing. What a way to undo some of the relationship and trust work I had done with this person. And that's what happens when you're removed completely from this process, when you just hire somebody and then show up on these interviews that have been booked. A really solid agency is going to have touch points where you come in where you know this stuff. I Another client I worked with a really great pitch group. I think he was actually just a single service provider, if I remember correctly. And they had a background in PR and they had really great relationships. But more importantly, they understood the importance of this process. And one of the things they did is they sent a core email to the client, and then the client did some of this customization. Oftentimes, because what happened earlier in the process is when they were in research and alignment and getting ready to go to outreach, they would start sending over episodes of shows to the client and say, "Hey, give this a listen." Or, "Hey, do you know anybody who's been on the show? Like, look at the previous guests," or like looking for that way in. And so those had already sort of been raised for them, and they could involve that in that customization of the actual outreach email. A good partner should not only understand your message and your brand positioning. I mean, that feels like a base, like, sort of minimum to me, but they should also understand the importance of pulling the lever that is you in this process. I think that oftentimes we as consumers, as the client, want to be able to do this in as hands off of a way, as easy of a way as possible. Because in our brain, that's what outsourcing really looks like. Is I'm going to give you ownership of this, but we have to take some ownership here. And again, we're going to talk about this when I talk about our involvement. So get ready for me to get this soapbox back out. But I want you to be looking for folks who are not only explaining their process to you, but explaining your role in their process. Because in my opinion, that is the most complete process option there is where you come into play. The second thing I want, and this one is going to have some nuance, because when I say it, you're going to go, "Well, I'm just looking for," and I want you to stay with me, all right? But I want you to look at how they're pricing. This does not mean we're shopping by price. I don't like, the number is irrelevant. What I want you to be looking at is the business model, the structure of the pricing, because there's kind of three ways that they get priced out. One is per pitch. This really incentivizes or like sets the goal at quantity over quality. We're looking for volume. I'm getting paid by outreach I send out. It doesn't matter what the quality of fit is. It doesn't matter what the quality of outreach is. As long as I sent out outreach, I'm getting paid. I think you can probably sense the red flags here. The other option is per booked appearance. I like this because it tends to be a factor around at least you're actually getting on shows. However, they often end up targeting a batch of lower quality shows because they're going for the easiest yes instead of the highest quality yes. So yeah, now you may be hitting some crazy numbers. You may be getting on 5, 10 15 podcasts a month. It's a little spray and pray for my taste. Because now it's just about, in the same way the per pitch is quantity over quality, this is like, well, at least we're getting a quality outreach, we're getting yeses, we're getting something, but what we're getting is not great. The third way I see this is a flat monthly retainer. This would be, in my opinion, probably my preference if I were doing it. I think these three, there's not a right one or a wrong one. You just need to be aware of what your goal is with each of them. But this works only if it includes some really important things, and that is the strategy. There needs to actually be a plan. What shows are we going after? Why are we going after those shows? What are the end goals of having gone after and booked on these shows? They also need to be doing a really good job of tracking and managing ongoing relationships. So, like, where are there shows that have said no for now? Are we going to be following up with those shows? Are we long term? Again, I come back to this idea of like spray and pray. Like, are we just throwing as many sort of lines in the water and hoping something bites? Or are we doing a thing where we're reaching out to the shows we know we want to be on, and I'm working with you on a retainer basis because you're going back to these shows that are saying, "I'd love to have Stacy on, but we're not taking guests right now, or we're booked out for the year." We often get this as feedback, especially when we start to hit Q3, Q4. More and more, your response is going to be, "I'd love to have you on the show, but I've actually already finished recording, certainly booking guests, but possibly even recording for this year. I won't be revisiting guests until XYZ." And so If you're going to be working with somebody on an ongoing basis, they need to be managing that. Again, this is not about one option being better than the others. This is not about one option being an absolute no for me. It's about, what is your goal? What are the results you're paying for? Is it credibility? Is it building relationships with certain kinds of shows and certain kinds of hosts? Is it quality lead generation? Is it general visibility and links back to your website and just like a feeling of you're everywhere? Because then per booked appearance might be the way. Also, what are you paying for in terms of deliverable? Part of that flat monthly rate of having somebody who actually owns this as if it were a department in my business, like somebody who's like, I'm managing those relationships, I'm keeping an eye on new shows that pop up there, I'm managing relationships I have with podcasts. That's the other thing I like about monthly, is a lot of times these are folks who've been in this a while and they have established high quality relationships with the people who host the shows you want to be on. Uh if they're like that, there's value in that. There is retainer value in that. There is value in me having you on my team, even if I'm only booking 1, 2, 3 appearances a month. That's cool because I'm going for ongoing, consistent overtime. Like, I want to be doing 2 shows a month most of the months of the year, because now by the end of the year, I've got like what, 24, 28 maybe podcast interviews. Hell yeah. I'd rather have 28 podcast interviews over a year where it's peppered out for my sales goals, for my visibility goals. But if I were publishing a book, or I had a huge program launch coming out and I needed to get visibility now and I needed a lot of it and I needed to book 15, 20, 30 interviews to go out of the next 90 days, then per booked probably works better. And so be paying attention to how they're priced, because it sort of it gives you insight into what their focus is. If you pair this with their process, you're going to have a really deep understanding of if they align with your goals. I talk about this a lot when I meet with people from a podcast perspective. I don't work with all podcasts. There are lots of kind of podcasts where I'm like, I'm not the girl for you. If you want to be internet famous, if you're looking to be an influencer, if you're looking to sell merch to an audience and build sponsorships and get invited on brand trips, I don't think that's bad. There are versions of that shows I watch that I love, but I don't produce them. It's just not the kind of work I do. And I'm not priced, and my process doesn't present for those kinds of clients. The same is true here. The pricing structure, how they're priced, and the process they're using will give you a lot of insights and understanding into if they're going to be able to deliver the goal you're trying to reach. The third thing is, I want insights into how they qualify a show. So this is like process plus. What is important to them? Who's vetting the shows? What understanding about me and my business and what I'm looking for do they have? How are they measuring relevance? Is it all about audience sizes? I see a lot of podcasts going, yeah, we're going to be pitching shows that are 1% in listener notes or better. That doesn't tell me a lot. I personally really love pitching small shows. You want to know why? They promote their shows. They care about their guests. They care about their audience. They vet their guests. They come prepared. But also, my goal is not to get 15,000 new leads from a podcast. By the way, that should be no one's goal. I was being dramatic for funsies, okay? That shouldn't be ever anybody's goal. But I'm in a business model, and I talk about this a lot. We're like, I need like 10 to 15 people if we're selling summer camp, which we are this summer, by the way. I'm very excited. To buy for me each year. Other than that, it's recurring revenue and returning clients. Like, that's a big part of my revenue. And so I don't need to be on shows that have massive audiences, because I'm cool if I get 2, 3 new leads from a show. Great. That's fantastic. So small shows can be good for me, but that's not the case for everybody. And in some cases, when you're pitching these services, they're saying we're never going to talk to a show that has less than XYZ download numbers. Are they looking at topic alignment? Are they looking at business fit? Are they looking at the frequency at which they produce episodes and release them? Are they looking at the consistency in which they promote their episodes? That's a big one for me. If you're not going to promote the show, you're bringing on guests and hammering away at how I need to, and then you're not, you're looking for me to bring you people. That's not win-win. That's just win. We need both wins. All right. Red flags to watch out for. They can't explain it. They don't know. Or they have hard numbers or hard lines that are in contrast to yours. For example, for me, I'm not looking to be on a show that, has to have, 50,000 downloads within, the first day downloads for me to want to be on the show. First of all, not very many shows are getting that, just so you know, heads up. Again, check out the buzzsprout.com/global stats. But on the flip side, I do care about a show having been around. And so I don't want to be on a show that has been around for 3 episodes. I need more than that. I need to know they're sticking with this. And so look for their hard lines to be the same as your hard lines and not in opposition of. One thing is I would much rather them care about giving me 5 shows that are a great fit for me than 50 shows that are like definitely podcasts. And when we ask questions like, how are you qualifying shows? Which one of those they care most about is going to become very clear. And it needs to match with what you care about. All right. As we start to wrap up, I do want us to be cautious about not forgetting that we're a relevant part of this process too. So one of the biggest questions I want you to be asking is, what do I need to do? What do you need from me? And if their answer is nothing, red flag. What I want them to be looking for is, I want it to be clear that they have a good understanding of why I want to be on these podcasts. What my goal for these placements is. Is it sales? Is it visibility? Is it positioning? Is it lead generation? If it is lead generation, how many leads do I really need to reach my goals? They need to have an actual understanding of what your main sort of messaging is. What is it you talk about? And not just in a like thought leadership way. Like, I want to be a thought leader in the podcasting space. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about podcasts can be the central engine of your marketing machine if you build it with the intention of it filling that role. If you support it in executing those job responsibilities, it will serve that job in your business. But you have to be building it in a way that allows you to do that. And that takes building sales assets, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I need them to understand that that's what I'm talking about. Not just podcasting is great or whatever. I also want to be on the same page with how I'll measure success and how they measure success. So if they're not clear on how you're going to measure success in this process, that's going to be a struggle. I'm also looking for them to tell me where I'm relevant in their process. We talked a lot about this when we were talking about process, but I want to know, where am I going to need to show up and where am I going to see things? Because I do want to see things in the process. I do want to see the curated list of shows you're thinking about pitching so that I can go, oh, I know so-and-so and a friend of mine was on this show. And I actually, you know what? I've actually listened to this show and it's not a good fit for me. We've got a misalignment in core values or in brand messaging or in how we approach business or whatever. I want to be coming in. And so I want them to say, you're going to get that list and I'm going to need you to go through it. And here's how the timeline in which we'll need it back from you. I want them giving me deadlines, right? We're going to send out the pitch emails to you on this Friday for approval before they go out on Monday or Thursday to Monday or whatever that is. And you'll need to approve those emails so that I can go into my calendar and say, cool, I'm going to be responsible for this stuff. And so I need to make this time. It's not just about me showing up on shows. It is about me optimizing this so that I'm getting on the shows where I'm going to get the best results. I'm going to get the most juice for my squeeze. That squeeze is your time. Remember, visibility without strategy and without your involvement, where it's super hands off and you just show up and do your thing, that's vanity. That's not strategy. And I need you to understand the difference, because understanding the difference will make it easier to swallow how involved you're still going to need to be, even though you're investing at what feels like a stretchy level. Because it might be a stretchy level. It almost always is, right? You're asking them to do a lot. That doesn't mean you get to do nothing. You still got to do stuff too. If they never ask about your offers, your funnel, your audience, and there's not consistent mechanisms to make sure what they're pitching, the research they're doing, is in alignment with those, they are a booking service, not a pitching or visibility strategy service. That doesn't make either of those things wrong, but we've got to be clear on who they are. Because when we hire a booking service, yes, you will probably get to be more hands-off. But when we are hiring a visibility partner, when we're hiring somebody who's going to help us show up strategically in the places that get us closer to our goals, they're probably going to need you to show up more. And you got to be ready for that, because this is going to be uncomfortable. It's visibility, baby. These things always are. All right? So, recapping, we want to talk to them about their process, their pricing, how they qualify shows, and what we're going to be responsible for, what we need to own. And that ownership starts long before reaching out to some of these agencies does, okay? It means having an understanding of all of these things that you're going to talk to them about and why they're relevant and the kind of answers you want to be getting before you go out and do that pitching. Because that's the difference between strategic visibility and ego, vanity, right? We've got to be thinking this stuff through, because it is a huge energetic output. It is a big piece of our capacity, and it's not a small investment when we're looking at really high quality partners. All right. I will say, for me, I have chosen not to partner. I have a lot of relationships with podcasters. I have a lot of relationships with uh, folks who frequently guest on podcasts. So I have a lot of referral ways in. And in this season of my business and the amount of shows I want to be on, my goals, my best option is leveraging my existing network. This means more hands-on sort of admin work for me because I do it myself, but it also means the personal touch, and the bar is low. If I had different goals, and I may at some point, I would likely choose a different option. There is no one right answer. DIY can be great. Pitch services can be fantastic. It's just about what's right for you in the season of business you're in right now. With that, quick reminder that we do have that spot for the accelerator open, the podcast launch accelerator open for Q2, and we'll be starting to look at Q3 soon. So head on over to uncommonlymore.com/accelerator if you're interested in getting your show launched. We also, by the way, sneak it in here, we have a production spot open too. So if you have an existing show and you want to talk to us about production, maybe because you need more of your podcast capacity time to be sent in you doing some of this pitching stuff. I know we have had clients who have shifted from DIYing their podcast to us producing their podcast because of exactly that reason. They wanted to take on a different part of their marketing hands-on, and so they needed to free up their hands somewhere. We do have a production spot, and you can go to uncommonlymore.com/production to learn more about that or submit a form for us to have a chitty chat. All right? I'll see you right back here next week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for this show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.